believes that a zombie outbreak will occur in a month. Both my parents and my brother and his wife are completely convinced of this. They sold all their assets and used all their savings to build a safe house. Money will become the most useless thing when we no longer have our lives, they argued. You should quickly sell your house and car too, exchange them for money to stock up on supplies, and move in with us, they urged me. I was skeptical and found many flaws in my nephew's apocalyptic claims. After unsuccessfully trying to persuade my parents and brother multiple times, I overheard a conversation between my sister-in-law and my mother. Do we really have to let Scarlett move back in? If she comes, she'll take up another room, my mother firmly assured her. If she doesn't move in, let Scarlett give us the money. And when the zombie outbreak happens, we'll just kick her out after the zombies are gone. We'll burn some paper money for her as a tribute. That should be enough to honor her. I couldn't help but smile and turned to introduce them to an online lending platform. During work, I received a secretive call from my mom, urging me to take leave and come home immediately. I rushed home to find my brother and sister-in-law off work and my nephew Aiden also at home, not attending school. My parents sat on the sofa, showing a mix of nervousness and excitement upon my arrival. Before I could even sit down, there was a knock on the door. It was Oscar, the real estate agent from downstairs. My mother warmly welcomed Oscar into the house and started showing him around. Oscar, puzzled, asked, "Auntie, are you sure you want to sell the house? You bought it less than half a year ago. Sell it. We need to sell it quickly. Drop the price by 300,000 or even 500,000 if necessary, but it must be sold within half a month," my father decisively stated. Oscar glanced at me. Knowing that I had bought the house through him 6 months ago and that while my parents lived there, I was the owner, he turned to me, seeking confirmation. "If you discount it by 300,000, our agency can take it off your hands in 10 days, but are you sure you want to sell? It's a shame since it's just been renovated." Hearing this, my parents eagerly agreed. Normally, they would complain about overpaying even 50 cents for eggs, but today they didn't blink an eye at losing 300,000 on the house, which was highly unusual. "Why are you selling the house, Dad? It's just been renovated. Why sell it?" I interrupted their conversation. "It's our house, and it's none of your business if we want to sell it," my dad replied, clearly annoyed by my interruption. "But the house is in my name. I paid for it. How is it none of my business?" my sister-in-law sarcastically chimed in. "Didn't you say this house was a gift to honor your parents?" Little sister-in-law talks nicely, but she doesn't let her parents have a say. If little sister-in-law is unhappy, she can kick out mom and dad anytime. Hearing this, I retorted unhappily, "If you're so filial, why don't you buy a house for mom and dad? Why are you living in the house I bought for them?" My brother yelled at me, "Show some respect to your sister-in-law. She doesn't have to put up with you." My dad, even more angered by our quarrel, pointed at me and said, "What's yours? It's all our family's. And if I say we're selling the house, we must sell it. Oscar, go get the contract from the store. We're signing today." Oscar, realizing the family discord and that I was unaware of the decision to sell, tried to mediate. "Uncle, Auntie, it's too late today. Please discuss this properly with Scarlett. If you decide to sell, just let me know, and I can come over anytime. I have another client to see today, so I'll be going now. Call me if you need anything." With that, he pushed the door open and left before my dad could respond. A month from now, there will be a zombie outbreak. The entire city will be paralyzed, with no water, electricity, or gas. Our family was trapped at home, afraid to go out. Eventually, after we ran out of supplies, my brother and sister-in-law were forced to go out and look for more, but they never returned. Later, while my father was out looking for them, my nephew witnessed him being killed by zombies. My mother was killed by other surviving neighbors, who then dismembered her body for food. Finally, my nephew sneaked out of the house. During his search for food, he encountered a horde of zombies and met his demise. My mother couldn't help but tear up as she spoke. "My poor grandson, your grandparents failed to protect you." With a solemn face, my nephew told everyone, after the zombie outbreak, "The most terrifying thing isn't the zombies, it's the humans." His words made my mother cry again. Wiping her tears, she said, "It's because of this that your father and I are planning to sell this house. We can sell it for 3 million. Your father and I have 500,000, and your brother and sister-in-law have 300,000. You should have over 1 million on hand. Let's all contribute and raise 5 million together to build a doomsday-safe house." My brother impatiently said, "Mom, why discuss it with her? The house is yours and Dad's to do as you please." I ignored my brother and turned to my mother. "Mom, we haven't owned this house for long, and you and Dad really like it. Selling it now doesn't seem wise." Hearing this, my brother disdainfully said, "When the apocalypse really hits, money will be the most useless thing. All those years of education, yet so little insight." I couldn't help but laugh at his comment. Money may indeed be useless in the apocalypse, so why don't you sell your house? It's in a school district and would probably sell even better. That comment made my brother's face turn red. "My wife and I have grown attached to our house. Besides, after the apocalypse is over, your nephew will still need it for school." It was clear to me that they were treating me like a fool, so for building a safe house costing $5 million, I should contribute $2 million, while Mom and Dad give $500,000, and your family of 3 only gives $300,000. Brother, weren't you planning to buy a Mercedes G-Class? That's $1 million right there. Why not use that money instead? After all, cars won't be much use in the apocalypse. You can't run over zombies with them." As my brother and I argued, my mother gave him a knowing look, and he turned away, muttering about not having any money. Sitting beside me, my mother started crying again. I couldn't bear to see her like this, and worried what if my nephew was telling the truth. Trying to calm myself, I gently asked my nephew, "Tieni, this is a serious matter. Do you have any proof that you've really come back from the future?" He glanced at me, a flicker of panic in his eyes, and his hand unconsciously touched his nose. As a psychologist, years of experience told me that my nephew was lying. I patiently continued to press him. "Think about it. Is there anything that happened before the zombie outbreak, or could this be a dream? Zombie novels have been popular lately. Could you have confused a plot with reality?" Under my questioning, my nephew burst into tears, crying out that he couldn't remember. Seeing him cry, my sister-in-law hugged him tightly, displeased. "Scarlett, did you become a psychologist only to develop a psychological disorder? He's just a kid. Do you really think he could lie to you? People just don't appreciate good intentions." As my nephew cried, my mother also spoke in a reproachful tone. "Dabao is still a child. He couldn't remember anything from that situation, but you know what kind of child your nephew is. Dabao never lies." Of course, I knew my nephew well. Raised in a coddled environment by doting parents, I was the undisputed little tyrant of the house. At school, I was known for bullying classmates and being a habitual liar. But my parents never acknowledged my wrongdoings. Each time teachers approached them, they would fiercely argue, causing the teachers to dread dealing with me. I suggested to my mom and brother's wife, "You should really ask Tieni about the details of this apocalypse he talks about. After all, apocalyptic stories are popular now, and it's possible he's just influenced by them and fantasizing." Hearing this, my brother, who was pretending to ignore the conversation, pointed at me angrily and shouted, "You heartless girl, our parents still care about you, thinking we'd all be together in an apocalypse, and yet you don't believe your own nephew. You deserve to be eaten by zombies like in your past life." It became clear that the whole family believed fervently in my nephew's apocalyptic tales. No matter what I said, they wouldn't listen. Without another word, I grabbed my bag and left the house. That night, the more I thought about my nephew's behavior, the more convinced I became that he was lying. I remembered installing cameras in each room when the house was renovated, considering my elderly parents' safety, deciding to observe my nephew through the surveillance footage. I pulled up the video feeds on my computer. My nephew had already gone to bed, but I overheard a chilling conversation between my parents and my brother and his wife. My brother asked, "What if the apocalypse never happens?" My dad replied, "If it doesn't happen, no harm done. We could use this as a chance to make that ungrateful girl sell the house. Even if the apocalypse doesn't come, we'll have the money." My mom complained, "Scarlett really is an ingrate. She wouldn't even put the house in our names, insisting on keeping it in hers." My sister-in-law rolled her eyes and added, "That's just her guarding against us, afraid that you'd leave the house to me and Caleb, keeping secrets from her own family. She really is a thankless wolf. And if the apocalypse does happen, are we really going to let Scarlett come back and take up a room?" My dad reassured her firmly, "We're just tricking her into giving us the money. When the zombies come, we'll just kick her out. At least she would have contributed to the family. After the apocalypse, we'll have Tieni burn some paper for her. That should be enough." Tears streamed down my face as I listened. I knew my brother and his wife were selfish, but I never imagined my own parents would see me as so expendable. The family I wholeheartedly cared for was plotting against me. From now on, I wouldn't let anyone use familial bonds to trap me. If there were another life, I'd rather be an orphan than have a family like this. I contacted my agent Oscar and a hacker friend that night, arranging my affairs before finally going to bed, eagerly awaiting the drama that would unfold the next day. Early the next morning, I was sitting in my parents' living room, my brother and his wife ignored me, and my nephew rolled his eyes at me. My parents' first question was whether I had decided to sell the house. With red, swollen eyes, I croaked, "Dad, Mom, what Tanny said must be true. I spoke to Jocelyn last night, and she warned me to keep this a secret." Jocelyn, a childhood friend, now worked in a national security department and was usually very reliable. As we spoke, my brother, busy with his phone, suddenly exclaimed, "Damn, there's a video of zombies abroad, I'll send it to you." But as he spoke, the video was taken down. I urged my brother to contact the video's poster to find out what was going on. He discovered the poster's IP was foreign. Just after he messaged them, their account vanished. Now, my parents and my brother and his wife were utterly convinced about the zombie crisis, standing confidently before me. My nephew said smugly, "Auntie, you were wrong. Aren't you going to buy me a toy to apologize?" Tearfully, I agreed to buy him one later, and only then did he leave satisfied. My dad also spoke commandingly, "Now you see your nephew was right, don't you? Quick, contact Oscar and get this house sold fast," my dad urged. Upon hearing my dad's words, I burst into tears. The reason I refused to discuss selling the house yesterday is that I've already mortgaged it, and I don't actually own it anymore. I confessed, I had a boyfriend before, and we were about to meet each other's parents, but it turned out to be a scam. Hearing this, my mom raised her voice and demanded, "What are you saying? You were scammed." I put all my acting skills to use today, crying so hard I could barely catch my breath. Yes, I was cheated out of over $4 million, and now this house, along with another in my name, are both mortgaged with the bank. My father, furious, clutched his chest and cursed me for my foolishness. Just then, Oscar arrived. He looked at me apologetically and said, "Scarlett, I've spoken to the bank, and it's certain you can't sell this house. It's a good outcome if it just covers your bank debt." My mom panicked immediately, pulling at my dad, asking what to do. "Let's sell your brother and sister-in-law's apartment then. It's in a good school district and should fetch a good price," I suggested. Oscar picked up on my suggestion and said, "I have a client interested in Caleb's school district apartment. If you decide to sell, we could sign the contract today, and you'd have the money in your account within a week." "What do you mean? Why should we sell our house? It's always my family that ends up being targeted," my sister-in-law yelled, her voice strained with anger. I quietly explained, "In the future, money and houses will be the least of our concerns. Being alive is what matters most." My sister-in-law was about to retort when my brother pulled her into another room. After a while, they came out, and she reluctantly agreed to sell the house. Oscar happily went to prepare the contract, leaving us looking at each other in silence. After a long pause, my brother spoke up, "This house can go for $2 million, and I have another $500,000, with the $50,000 you and Mom have. It's still not enough to prepare properly." My dad looked at me and asked, "How much money do you have now?" "I only have $100,000, I replied weakly. Just as my dad was about to raise his hand to slap me, I quickly continued, "Dad, don't be angry. I have a plan. We can all apply for online loans. There are so many platforms. We can try each one. We could raise not just $5 million, but even $10 million if needed. After all, if it's the end of the world, we wouldn't need to pay it back. Who knows if these people will even be alive after it's all over?" My parents and my brother and sister-in-law fell silent for a moment. In a soft voice, my mom asked, "Can we really do what Scarlett suggested?" "Sure, it's practically the end of the world anyway. What's there to lose? Staying alive is what's most important," my brother declared, slapping his thigh in agreement. I listed all the online loan platforms I had found the night before and had them download each one. It took them an hour to get them all. Then, my sister-in-law suddenly said, "Scarlett, you go first. We'll follow your lead." I looked embarrassed and replied, "Because I've already taken out several million in mortgage loans from the bank, I can't borrow from online platforms." I tried to demonstrate to them, going through the process on each platform, but at the final step, each one indicated that my credit was not eligible. My sister-in-law scolded me, "You're really useless, always acting like you're so successful, but the moment there's trouble, your true colors show. This is what happens when a woman doesn't get married at her age." Easily scammed. "You used to hoard your money, refusing to spend it on us, and now you've ended up with nothing." I bowed my head, ignoring her sarcastic comments, pretending I hadn't heard. "Dad, Mom, my brother and his wife managed to borrow $10 million from an online lending platform in just one afternoon." I pretended to be concerned and asked, "Do we really need that much money? Anyway, we don't have to pay it back, so we might as well borrow as much as we can." My mom said nonchalantly, not even looking up from her reading glasses, "Greed can lead to disastrous results. They'll have their comeuppance eventually." At that moment, Oscar arrived with the contract and quickly finalized the sale of the house. Seeing that everything was settled, I also grabbed my bag, ready to leave. Mom and Dad, I'm going back home to pack some things, and then we can move together, I said. My brother scoffed in response. Then my mom looked up, forced a smile, and said, Scarlett, transfer that 100,000 yuan you have to Mom. It's your contribution too. Also, take stock of any household and food items you have and bring them over. Suppressing the bitterness in my heart, it seems that if there really were an apocalypse, it wouldn't leave any escape routes for me. I returned to my own home, comfortably lying on the big bed, and pulled up the surveillance feed of my parents' house. They were still immersed in the excitement of the impending apocalypse, discussing the supplies they needed to buy. They were following a shopping list inspired by apocalyptic novels, and their tasks were clearly divided. My brother was responsible for renting an apartment the next day. He was supposed to find a secluded unit on the top floor of a new complex, ideally renting out both apartments served by a single elevator if possible. After securing the apartment, he planned to hire a renovation team to refit it with bulletproof glass, high-security doors, soundproofing materials in the walls, and solar panels on the roof. My father was tasked with buying weapons and fitness equipment. While my mother was in charge of purchasing household and medical supplies, my sister-in-law would handle food and entertainment products. The family had everything neatly planned out. While they discussed what to buy, they occasionally criticized me for being useless. My father, frustrated, said, "That useless girl might as well die in a zombie's mouth, otherwise she'll just drag us down." During their discussion, there was a knock at the door. It turned out to be a delivery they had ordered, and the meal boxes and the delivery person's uniform were from the most expensive Japanese restaurant in town. The food, including lobster, abalone, king crab, and salmon, was laid out on the table by the server, who also brought out a bottle of red wine and a bottle of mitai. Just this meal alone cost over 20,000, and my brother paid without blinking an eye. My parents were obviously shocked by the extravagance. They were used to living frugally and could never imagine spending so much on a single meal. My brother, with a grand gesture, told them, "It's the end of the world anyway. We have fewer good days ahead, so let's splurge while we can." Inspired by my brother, my father said, "Open the mitai. I've never dreamt mitai or eaten king crab in my life. At least we can say we've lived well." My nephew joyfully ran around the house with a king crab leg before settling down to eat it. The family feasted noisily, treating it as a pre-apocalyptic celebration. Watching the greedy scene through the surveillance feed, I coldly shut my laptop. With 20 days left until the zombie outbreak mentioned by my nephew, the transfer of my brother and sister-in-law's house was completed, and the money was transferred to their account. Previously, my parents often called me to arrange for me to buy supplies, but I always found excuses to avoid it, asking them to let me know once the house was ready so I could move in directly. 10 days before the supposed outbreak, their safe house was finally ready. From the surveillance, I learned that they had paid the workers double the market wage to finish the job quickly. They began moving their purchased supplies to the safe house, expecting to complete the transfer within a week. 3 days before the outbreak, the whole family moved into the safe house. I frantically called my parents and my brother and sister-in-law, and after a long wait, my mother finally answered, "Mom, please send me the address, I'll come to you." My mother looked evasive and sought help with her eyes, and then my brother snatched the phone, boasting triumphantly, "Aren't you the one who always did well in school, made some money and forgot your own name?" Looking down on your brother, when I asked you to buy a house, you reluctantly gave 300,000. When I asked you to buy a car, you scrimped and saved to give 100,000. Are you kidding me? Let me tell you, Scarlett, I'm not going to look after you, just wait to feed the zombies," he said, and then he hung up. When I tried calling back, I found out he had blocked my number. Then, I received a message from my mother on WeChat, "Scarlett, don't worry, if you survive, we'll reunite after the apocalypse. Don't bother us anymore, your brother and sister-in-law are already upset." When I tried to send another message on WeChat, it showed that I was blocked on WeChat. I tried calling and messaging each of them, only to find out that I had been blocked by everyone. Even though I had already realized what kind of people their family was, I still felt a bit sad at that moment. To me, they were once a family I deeply loved, but to them, I was always the one who could be abandoned. After confirming that my parents would not be coming out of the safe house, I invited Oscar over to my place. I needed to sell both my parents' house and my own as soon as possible. After explaining my family situation to Oscar, he enthusiastically agreed to play along and convinced my parents that I was indeed out of money and that the houses could not be sold. When Oscar arrived, he directly asked, "Scarlett, you're selling both these houses?" "Yes. Once they realize that the apocalypse isn't coming, they'll definitely start causing trouble for me." Oscar nodded in understanding and then asked, "So, have you seen any houses you like? I can keep an eye out for you." I just smiled and shook my head, saying nothing. After finalizing all the procedures with Oscar, I sincerely thanked him. Oscar, scratching his head sheepishly, said, "Scarlett, you might not remember, but buying this house was the first deal I closed after I started working. If it weren't for you, I might have lost my job. Also, I remember how you gave me a drink when it was hot. I've kept all these gestures in my heart. I think you're a genuinely good person." I was touched that such small acts of kindness were remembered by a friend, while my family always seemed to think my efforts were never enough. "By the way, Oscar, if these houses are sold to unreasonable people like mafia types, I'll give them a discount of 50,000. Oscar looked puzzled at first, but then understood my intention. "All right, sis, I got it." A week later, Oscar had sold both houses for $8 million, which had been deposited into my account. I booked a flight to Yunnan overnight, and by the time I opened my eyes, I had arrived in this beautiful city. It had been 10 years since I graduated, and I had been working hard every day without rest. Now, I could finally take a break. On my third day in Yunnan, I received a call from Tanny's class teacher. "Aunt Tanny, why hasn't Tanny been coming to class lately?" I called his father, and he said something about a zombie outbreak. "Do you know what's going on with Tanny?" I explained to Tanny's class teacher that I was on a business trip and wasn't sure about the home situation before hanging up. Catching up on the timeline, it was already past the date my nephew had mentioned for the zombie outbreak, so I expected a call from my family soon. A week later, just as I had bought a small courtyard in Yunnan to start a hostel, I received a call from my mom. "Scarlett, what's it like outside? Were there no zombies after all?" "Mom, the streets are full of zombies. And I'm almost out of food. Where are you guys? Can I come to you?" But everything looks normal outside our community, and we still have water, electricity, and gas. "Really? I've lost all utilities here." "Mom, send me your address." After hearing this, my mom hurriedly hung up the phone. When I tried calling back, I found out that I had been blocked again. Only now did I fully realize how foolish and malicious my family truly was. As for the hostel, I started setting up a social media account to document the entire renovation process. Recently, home renovation videos have become very popular, which has also attracted many followers to my account. Many adorable fans have been offering suggestions, and some who study design even send me their renderings. They call my place their virtual guest house, while discussing the next steps with the workers. My mother called me again. On the other end of the phone, she berated me furiously. "Scarlett, you little wretch, did you set us up on purpose? There's no zombie outbreak, you're just lying. Now we're constantly harassed by debt collectors calling us. We don't even dare to step outside. You must pay back this money for us, or we are cutting ties with you." I held the phone away from my ear and waited for her to finish before I replied, "Well, if it's cutting ties, then so be it. I'll go change my name in a bit. Wasn't it your beloved grandson who talked about the zombie apocalypse? What does that have to do with me, Mrs. Gloria? You and Mr. Harold, you all better stay hidden in your safe house and not go out, or if you can't pay your debts, the debt collectors will chop off your limbs." After saying that, I hung up the phone and blocked her. Just after blocking my mom, my dad called, but I decided to just turn off my phone. In the afternoon, I went to the police station to change my name. Originally, during the pregnancy, they thought I was a boy and named me Theodore. When I turned out to be a girl, they named me Scarlett, feeling it was a pity they missed out on a boy. But why should having me be considered a pity? I renamed myself Hope, and from now on, I will be just an ordinary girl full of hope for the future. After changing my name, I switched my SIM card and WeChat account, cutting off ties with the past except with a few close friends. I haven't heard from my parents since changing my phone number. Later, Oscar told me that my parents and my brother's family of 5 have been hiding in a safe house, too scared to come out. Their son's school teacher had called several times, but eventually gave up trying to communicate. Debt collectors blocked their door daily, employing useless tactics like throwing red paint and feces. The door they bought was of good quality. Debt collectors couldn't break in despite several attempts. Some neighbors called the police, but they refused to open the door, and since there wasn't any concrete criminal activity, and the lending platforms themselves were somewhat illegal, the police were reluctant to intervene. Now, their family of 5 has become infamous locally, turned into a joke. Hearing this news from Oscar, I felt a sense of relief as if a weight had been lifted from my heart. Months later, My guest house finally opened. Many online friends came to stay on the opening day. And some friends from out of town even sent me flower baskets. It was a joyful day, and I started a live stream at the request of my followers. After operating the account for a while, I've gained many followers. During a live stream, the camera accidentally swept over my face. I didn't mind it at that moment, but it gave them another chance to cling to me. The opening day went smoothly, and for the first 3 days, I invited friends who had helped me with ideas to stay for free. After their experience, many of them voluntarily promoted my place on social media. Some of them were minor internet celebrities, and their promotions made our place extremely popular. Hard to book a room. As I was reveling in the success of launching the guest house, Oscar called me. He told me that after hiding in the safe house for half a year, my family couldn't stand it anymore. One morning, unable to bear the daily arguments and monotonous food, my nephew secretly opened the door. The debt collectors who had been watching the house for a long time finally got in. They vented their pent-up frustration on my parents and my brother and his wife, beating them up. It ended with them chopping off one of my brother's fingers, threatening them to pay back the money within a week or else face death. Oscar said they went to the house where my parents used to live, only to find that it had a new owner. At that time, my parents threw a tantrum, refusing to leave until a muscular man with a buzz cut and tattooed arms threw them out. Accustomed to bullying the weak and fearing the strong, they meekly left upon encountering the imposing man. They discovered where I lived and stood cursing at the doorstep upon finding out that my house had been sold. The buyer of my house was a notoriously difficult aunt who started hurling insults back at them when she saw them cursing outside her home, creating quite a scene. Eventually, unable to outshout or outshout them, they took their grievances to my workplace only to discover that I had resigned over half a year ago, and they couldn't find my new address despite asking around. Just as they were at their wits' end, an old neighbor came across my bed and breakfast on TikTok. During one of my live streams, they spotted me. When they shared this news with my parents, my brother contacted me through TikTok. Wow, our family is being hunted down, and here you are becoming an internet celebrity and running a big business. Our family has suffered terribly because of you. Your nephew is still so young. How could you bear this? You need to pay me back now, or I'll make sure your business can't continue. If you don't transfer $20 million to my account today. Prepare to be cyberbullied. Reading Caleb's messages nearly made me laugh out loud. How could he possibly think I had that much money? He deserved having to repay $20 million after borrowing $10 million online. I immediately blocked his account. That evening, I noticed a video mentioning me had gone viral, attracting numerous unknown netizens who came to insult me under my account. The ancients did not deceive me. Only women and villains are difficult to nurture. Using family borrowed loan money to start your business. Are you comfortable eating blood-steamed buns? Blogger, does your conscience not hurt? Can you sleep at night? Aren't you afraid of choking while drinking water? I watched the video my brother posted, where his family sat in front of the camera, accusing me. They claimed that to start the guest house, our parents and my brother and his wife had sold their houses to raise money for me, when the money was still not enough. I allegedly deceived them into taking a loan of $10 million, which I had promised to repay once the business made money but had now blocked them. Without money or a place to live, and hiding from debt collectors daily, they had no choice but to contact me this way. The back end of my guest house was full of cancellations and disapproving comments, while my employees looked at me, troubled. Scarlett, we don't believe you're this kind of person. But those netizens don't know. Should we clarify things for you? I shook my head, indicating I would handle it, and assured them not to worry. I knew the best time to manage a crisis was within 24 hours. However, I chose not to resolve it in 24 hours because I wanted to amplify the public opinion enough. 2 days later, other than the fans who had been following from the start, everyone else had cancelled their bookings. The incident had blown up online, with many bloggers condemning me, capitalizing on the controversy. At that point, I released a video, text, you seek kindness and humility, but resort to cheating and stealing. I aimed at the bright moon, but alas, the moon shines on the ditch. The video was long, detailing the incident thoroughly. Unlike their baseless accusations, my video included surveillance footage, recordings, chat screenshots, and the bank statements and contracts from my house transactions. It also showed the money I had spent on my parents over the years, and the money my brother and his wife had deceitfully taken from me under the guise of borrowing, totaling $2 million. The video went viral within half an hour, and apologies flooded in under my video. Seeing the end made me cry. Sister, you've had it so tough. How could there be such a parasitic family? If the sister didn't have this evidence, all her years of hard work would be in vain, misunderstood by everyone. What if there were really zombies or an apocalypse? Then their true colors wouldn't be like this. Sister, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have cancelled, now I can't even book that room again. They tried to harm me with public opinion and moral coercion, but it ultimately backfired on them. Now they were infamous locally, previously hidden in a safe house, they were thought to be unwell, but now everyone knew they were both foolish and malicious. Initially, they wanted to return to the safe house, but the landlord had changed the locks. They threw a tantrum and refused to leave, angering the landlord, who eventually called the police to remove them. They ended up like homeless people, sleeping under bridges, until one day, my brother discovered our parents sneaking out to eat every day and remembered they still received a pension, yet our parents, who had always favored him, refused to even buy him a bowl of noodles with their pension, which was the last straw for him. During a struggle over the pension bank cards, he pushed our parents into the street, where they died on the spot. Seeing all this, his wife, terrified, grabbed their son and tried to flee. Ultimately, she too was brutally killed by my deranged brother. Yes, Caleb had gone mad. Perhaps it was the day when, cornered by debt collectors, he was brutally injured. Perhaps it was witnessing his sister-in-law endure repeated harassment from creditors while his brother cowardly turned a blind eye. Perhaps it was those moments when acquaintances passing by, disdainfully tossed him a few coins. At that moment, he unleashed all the humiliation inflicted by outsiders onto his family. When the police arrived, he stood there foolishly, holding a knife, neither hiding nor running away. He kept muttering about having killed 2 zombies. When the police contacted me to take care of my parents' bodies, I asked Oscar to find a funeral service friend to handle it. I gave him 100,000 yuan to manage everything on my behalf. Meanwhile, I was busy planning the launch of my second guest house, which I named Tomorrow, because I believe my tomorrow will be better. Story 2. All 4 of us girls in the dorm room have been reborn, and one of us is even pregnant. With the apocalypse just 5 hours away, in our past lives, we supported each other in the struggle to survive the apocalypse, but ultimately perished at the hands of zombies. This time, we are determined to strive to live to 101. When I woke up, I was lying on the bed in my college dorm room, and my 3 roommates, Gabriella, Sophia, and Allison, were slowly sitting up as well. After staring at each other in disbelief for a moment, we confirmed that we had indeed been reborn. It was now 10 in the morning, and the apocalypse would arrive in 5 hours. Our first thought was to go home, but we were all from different provinces, and even if we bought tickets now, we wouldn't make it in time. In our past life, we had narrowly escaped danger by hiding in a restaurant private dining room, but we struggled immensely due to a shortage of food and water. Later, in an effort to survive, we ventured out and lived on the edge, hiding and dodging zombies, but still met our fate being bitten to death 6 months later. We should take shelter here and stock up on supplies, holding out as long as we can, I suggested. Gabriella nodded. I agree. But our door is as thin as paper, it won't keep zombies out. Plus, we don't have much money. How are we going to buy supplies? Even if we had the money, our dorm is so small. Where would we even put everything? Should we rent a place now? Sophia also expressed her worries. With only 5 hours left, there's no time to rent a place and buy supplies. I looked around the dorm, then tapped on the wall. Next door is the activity room. We can store supplies there for now. This wall isn't load-bearing, so we can make a hole in it later to get through. As for security, let's go to a building materials market, buy some lumber and tools, and fortify the doors and windows ourselves. Having survived the apocalypse before, we knew this was the quickest and easiest solution to implement. However, this process would definitely attract attention, but with limited time, we had to face whatever came our way. During our discussion, only Allison remained silent. Because she was pregnant, in our past life, her boyfriend was about to study abroad. During their farewell, they got carried away, resulting in an unexpected pregnancy. A month into the apocalypse, Allison started showing signs of pregnancy. The child, like the apocalypse, arrived unexpectedly, leaving us all in disarray. I'm sorry, I can't hold you back anymore. Thank you for taking care of me in our past life. Allison spoke firmly, then transferred all her money to us. Take this money to buy supplies and survive. If there's an afterlife, I will repay your kindness. I grabbed her hand. We're in this together. We promise to be aunts to your baby. Exactly. We survived the hardships of our past life. With prior knowledge this time, it will definitely be better. Don't be afraid. Allison, Gabriella and Sophia reassured her. Allison was emotionally unstable. We understood her worries and fears, but we couldn't afford to waste time fretting about the future, too. Our first step was to pool money. We took out what we had saved, including money from our parents, and borrowed freely from credit cards and lending platforms since we wouldn't need to repay. In half an hour, we managed to gather 83,000 yuan. We immediately split up to carry out our tasks. Gabriella went to the building materials market to buy materials, tools, and some suitable weapons. Sophia and I took responsibility for the life supplies. I contacted the water delivery person for 50 barrels of purified water. He thought I was joking until I sent over half the payment, and he happily arranged the delivery. Meanwhile, Sophia ordered various long-lasting food items online, which would be delivered by couriers, lightening our burden significantly. Allison, you stay in the dorm to receive the supplies and don't leave. Make sure all our laptops and power banks are fully charged. You're our lifeline. We devised this method to keep Allison back. Finally, Allison nodded. Go ahead without worry. I'll handle things here. Sophia grabbed the falling bag, and we hurriedly climbed up the stairs, our hearts heavy with the thought of what was about to unfold. There was a large supermarket just outside the school, where Sophia and I, dragging our suitcases, went to stock up. It was exam week, and most students were either taking exams or studying in the library. The campus and dorms were deserted, except for some bedsheets and duvet covers fluttering colorfully on clotheslines, reflecting the students' mood as they prepared for the upcoming holiday. On the way, we called our parents to warn them of an imminent emergency and advised them to rush home and stock up on supplies. However, they didn't believe us. They couldn't see how there could be an emergency when everything seemed so peaceful and harmonious. We couldn't explain further. We just kept insisting that if they noticed any danger around 3 p.m., they should not run around but find a place to hide immediately. After informing our parents, we reached the supermarket. First, we headed to the section with rice, flour, oil, and vacuum-packed foods, taking as much as we could carry. Our second trip was to the fuel section where we took all the solid fuel canisters we could find, filling up 4 suitcases to take back. When we returned to the dorm, the water delivery person had just arrived, hauling buckets of water up to the 4th floor activity room. The dorm supervisor, although puzzled by the amount of water, thankfully didn't ask too many questions. On our third trip to the supermarket, we picked up hygiene-related items such as toothpaste, toothbrushes, sanitary pads, underwear, trash bags, water filters, disinfectants, and masks. By the time we finished shopping, it was already 11:30 a.m. and Gabriella had returned from the hardware market. We moved all the materials and tools to the dorm together. What are all these supplies for? The dorm supervisor finally asked, unable to hold back her curiosity this time. We have a model project for our architecture course. I lied. She looked suspicious. You can work on your models, but remember, no high-powered electrical devices are allowed. I'll confiscate them. We nodded repeatedly while hiding a toolbox that contained a drill behind us. The food we ordered online kept arriving, attracting the attention of some classmates who gathered at our door. Alyssa, why aren't you studying? What are you up to? A classmate asked, looking at their youthful faces, knowing they would soon turn into zombies. I felt a pang of sadness and vaguely warned, we're worried about an emergency. You might want to stock up too. And don't wander around later. You guys are acting so strange. How could there be an emergency? We have exams tomorrow morning, and I don't want to fail, they said before leaving. Forget it. No one would believe this kind of thing. Let's go. Sophia sighed in resignation. Although we knew it was coming, we were powerless to stop it. At noon, with a checklist to cover any oversights, we returned to the supermarket to pick up anything we had missed. Leaving the supermarket, I noticed a motorcycle shop next door and decided to buy 4 helmets and sets of abrasion-resistant clothes and gloves. We knew we'd eventually have to venture out for food and water, and these could help reduce the risk of getting bitten and infected. At 1:30 p.m., with only an hour left before the apocalypse began, we made our last stops at a baby store and a pharmacy. In the baby store, based on online advice from mothers, we bought formula, baby clothes, blankets, diapers, bottles, and maternity packs, among other necessities. We even downloaded videos on childbirth, not knowing whether the little life would have the fortune to arrive, but we prepared for everything. As we were leaving, we also grabbed 2 child-sized toilets, which we could use with trash bags for our sanitation needs later. Finally, at the pharmacy, understanding that if no help arrived within 9 months, we would be delivering the baby ourselves, we stocked up on various supplements. Medicines, scissors, gauze, alcohol, and tourniquets, everything we might need, spending every last penny. At 2:40 p.m., we returned to the dorm in our car. Most students were out for exams, and the dorm building was eerily quiet. We climbed the stairs, laden with bags, when suddenly my hand felt lighter. Looking back, it was a passing girl who helped me lift the bag. "Thank you, I can manage," I declined. A bit wary, the girl flashed a bright smile. "No worries, just lending a hand," beside her. Another girl with short hair was helping Sophia with the baby formula. "Why are you still drinking baby formula? It's not suitable for us. You can buy formula specifically for students," the short-haired girl said with a laugh. "Okay, we'll switch next time," I responded. They helped us carry the items up the stairs to our dorm, heading up to the 6th floor where the horticultural department's dorms were located. After putting everything away and locking up the activity room, we silently returned to our dorm. At the age of 20, we awaited the end of days. At 3 o'clock, the clouds piled up in the sky, obscuring the sun. A scream tore through the campus, quickly followed by a second and third. The infected indiscriminately bit those around them, and those bitten soon turned into the walking dead. Allison curled up in bed, clutching her stomach, while we called our parents, urging them to stay hidden and not to wander around. Then I grabbed an electric drill from the toolbox, plugged it in, and Gabriella and Sophia instinctively picked up wooden planks. We began to nail the doors and windows shut in unison. Halfway through boarding up a window, a bloody hand appeared. It was Beatrice from the next room, who had been bitten. "Something's happened outside. I forgot my keys. Let me in to hide," she pleaded, fear evident in her eyes. Dark lines were already spreading across her neck, creeping towards her brain. She had at most 5 minutes before her consciousness would be completely gone, turning her into a zombie. "Beatrice, call your parents," I suggested. It seemed the kindest way to say goodbye. Beatrice paused, then looked at her reflection in the window. Seeing the terrifying lines, she began to scream frantically. She desperately banged on our door. "Let me in, please let me in." We couldn't open the door. All we could do was continue securing it while feeling utterly helpless. Beatrice's cries gradually quieted. Through the crack of the door, I saw her struggling to dial a number on her phone, quickly getting through. "Beatrice, hide quickly, something's happened outside." A worried voice came from the other end. "Mom," Beatrice called out weakly, then her phone clattered to the ground. Her eyes turned gray, devoid of any human expression. "Beatrice, Beatrice," her mother continued to call from the other end. But Beatrice could no longer hear. Her body swayed as she scratched at our door, drawn by the scent of the living, wanting to come in. We didn't have time to mourn for her, we just had to keep nailing the door shut. The news reported on the situation. Today, a calamity was unfolding globally. The government urged everyone to seek shelter nearby and wait for rescue. We contacted our parents again, relieved to find they were still alive. My mother cried, fearful that we might never see each other again. My father, a former soldier, was much calmer, advising me on how to fortify our house and stay safe. He reminded us to stay united, especially in times like these. "Allison, try contacting Alexander," I urged her. Allison was an orphan, supported by Alexander's family for her living and education. They were childhood sweethearts. Last time, we all managed to contact our families, except for her and Alexander. "Okay." Allison snapped back to reality and sent a voice message to Alexander. This time, the call connected. Upon learning that Allison was pregnant, Alexander urgently advised, wait for me to come back and get married," but he was on the other side of the ocean, separated from Allison by vast distances, making his return no easy feat. "Don't come back, stay hidden there, and wait until things stabilize before returning," Allison insisted, although we had no idea when that future stability would come. After we hung up, we continued our plan, taking advantage of the noisy chaos outside to start breaking through the wall. Half an hour later, we had created a hole just big enough for a person to squeeze through, and then nailed the door of the activity room shut. The activity room, facing the corridor, had no windows. Unless someone could fly up to the 4th floor from the back, no one would discover the supplies stored here. We didn't board up the balcony. Doing so would be too obvious, however. Since we were on the 4th floor and zombies can't fly, the only threat we anticipated was from other humans. By 7 p.m., the campus had quieted down considerably. Most people were infected and wandered aimlessly, looking out. Some dorm rooms still had lights on, and cries and curses could be heard occasionally. It seemed there were still people in our building, but I couldn't pinpoint their exact location. We didn't turn on the lights. opting instead to quietly organize supplies with the curtains drawn. The dorm room was now filled with stuff. We kept essentials within reach and moved everything else quietly into the activity room. When it was time to sleep, aside from Allison, the three of us took turns keeping watch. Each of us had a hammer and a knife at our side, ready to handle any emergencies. The next morning, the air had already filled with the stench of decay. It was summer, and bodies decomposed quickly. Someone was vomiting, but the four of us had grown accustomed to the smell, which would persist until winter arrived. We continued to contact our families, thankfully finding them still alive, and encouraged each other to keep going. After a simple breakfast, we bathed and cleaned up, then filled every basin and container with water. A message came through in the class group chat. The counselor was checking who was still alive. Only 4 guys responded, while we remained silent. Of the 42 students in our architecture class, only 8 survived. Someone in the group lit a virtual candle, followed by 3 others. The counselor advised in the chat, secure your doors and windows, keep quiet, store water, charge your batteries, and wait for rescue. But we knew rescue was unlikely to arrive anytime soon. At least not within the next 6 months. On the 3rd day of the apocalypse, the power and water shut off. As soon as we woke, we tried calling home, but this time, I couldn't reach my parents. Perhaps there was no signal, or perhaps, I didn't dare to think further, hoping it was just a connectivity issue. Allison, too, was unable to contact anyone. She and Alexander had lost communication since the previous night. We didn't say much, preparing for the worst, but hoping for the best. We turned off all computers and chargers, hoping the batteries would last for 9 months, long enough to watch videos that might help Allison during childbirth. Outside, the sound of zombies scratching at the door could be heard. Peering through the crack, I saw a dozen of my former classmates wandering the hallway in tatters. Is anyone still alive? Is there anyone left? 401, 402, 403. Someone in room 405 cried out hysterically. It sounds like she is on the verge of a breakdown. When the zombies heard the noise, they all gathered towards it. Being quiet at that moment was the most effective way to protect oneself, but I could understand her situation. She was probably the only one left in her dormitory. Soon her screams ceased. She must have realized that shouting would attract the zombies. On the 4th day of the apocalypse, the cell phone signal was completely gone. Around noon, we suddenly heard the sound of a car. Looking out the window, we saw a small van stop downstairs. A robust father and son duo, along with a middle-aged woman, climbed onto the vehicle and shouted at the top of their lungs, "Ashton, where are you?" Their shouting immediately drew the nearby zombies, but the zombies couldn't reach them due to the height of the van. Mom, Dad, brother. The girl in room 405 opened her window, crying with joy. It turned out her family had come to save her. The father and son spread out a blanket and shouted, "Ashton, jump down. We'll catch you." Without hesitation, the girl leaped down and her father and brother caught her firmly. Then the family embraced tightly. Seeing this, we all felt envious. Having family by your side during such times brought a sense of security. We too missed our parents. Even in death, it would be a blessing to be together. "Uncle, save me, take me with you," cried other dormitory residents upon seeing this. The man looked at them troubledly. With so many zombies around and the situation worsening, they had to leave soon. The car vanished from our sight, and its noise had attracted even more zombies. By the afternoon, gunfire was heard throughout the city. Rescue teams had arrived, sparking hope once again. Fighter jets circled overhead, their bullets sweeping across in rows, mowing down many zombies. But soon they rose again. Gradually, the gunfire died down, and the jets left. Firearms were of little use if they couldn't hit the zombies' heads. They merely wasted bullets. Many people started crying again. If even the rescue teams were helpless, what could ordinary people do? On the 5th day of the apocalypse, we faced our first critical situation. Sophia's period came early, and she wrapped herself in a blanket to keep her scent from leaking out, sweating profusely in the summer heat. We sealed the cracks in the doors and windows with tape and sprayed the room with mugwort-scented cologne to mask the smell of blood. This was a trick we had learned from past experiences, though it only worked in small spaces. Sophia emerged from the blanket. I stood by the door, listening to the sounds outside. The zombies in the hallway did not react to the blood, and none gathered under the balcony. We all breathed a sigh of relief. We hoped that when Allison gave birth, we could also keep it undetected from the zombies. On the 6th day of the apocalypse, a heavy rain fell. Surviving students stood on balconies with buckets to collect rainwater, and some even stripped down to shower. During the downpour, the zombies stood motionless, letting the rain wash over them. Among these zombies, I saw classmates and our counselor. Just a few days ago, the counselor was still checking in on who was alive in the group chat, instructing us not to go outside, but now She had become a zombie. Why hadn't she stayed safely in her room? There was only one explanation. She had already been infected when she sent those messages. I clasped my hands and prayed to the heavens, praying for every soul to find its place. Stop praying. This situation proves there are no gods. If there were, how could they allow humanity to suffer like this? Gabriella said angrily. Sophia shook her head. Maybe not. Perhaps our rebirth is part of some divine plan. That's true. But what can we do? We didn't know what we could do. The only thing we can do is to cherish this opportunity and live well. Day 10 of the apocalypse. Perhaps knowing that rescue was unlikely, the surviving students began to fend for themselves. After the rain stopped, I saw people tearing bed sheets into strips and tying them around themselves, then climbing from one balcony to another in search of supplies. Some people didn't have the habit of stocking up on snacks, and by day 10, they were nearly starving. They had no choice but to take the risk. Some were lucky, managing to find food and drink in the dormitories they entered, which allowed the survivors to hold out a bit longer. However, some were unfortunate enough to encounter zombies and had to evacuate quickly, but it was still too late. I noticed someone watching our side. Although they weren't looking directly at our dormitory, I felt they were planning something. Could they have found the stuff we left in the recreation room? Gabriella worried. I don't think so. We drew the curtains there. They probably planned to come over here after they ran out of supplies, I analyzed, but we both felt it was unlikely they could make it over. Despite the dorms being less than 100 meters apart, there were too many zombies. Getting to our side seemed almost impossible. Day 15 of the apocalypse. A bag of trash was thrown down from an upper floor, indicating there were still survivors in our building. I immediately thought of the two girls who helped us carry things on the day of the apocalypse, hoping they were still alive. The 5th and 6th floors are occupied by the horticulture and civil engineering departments. They won't come down, will they? Sophia worried. It's okay, we are all girls here, and even if they come to rob us, there are 4 of us. We can handle it, Gabriella responded. I looked up, listening intently to the sounds above. It was very quiet, and I couldn't tell which room they were in. Every few days, a bag of trash would be thrown down, and from this frequency, I deduced there weren't many people above. Day 30 of the apocalypse, Allison began experiencing morning sickness, along with symptoms like bleeding gums and cracked skin. This was because we hadn't eaten any fruits or vegetables for a long time. While we were managing okay, it was different for her since she was pregnant. That's strange. Isn't she taking vitamins every day? How could this happen? We opened the medical books we had downloaded on our phones and discovered that vitamins couldn't completely replace fruits and vegetables, and that some people could even get poisoned from taking too many. But where could we find fruits and vegetables now? Just as we were worrying, there was a noise from the balcony. We immediately held our breath and stayed silent. I picked up a knife and tiptoed over, with Gabriella and Sophia following me with weapons in hand. Peeking through a corner of the curtain, I saw a girl tied with bed sheets sitting on the railing, looking up and talking to someone above. I've made it. There seemed to be no zombies here. I remembered this girl. She was the one who had helped us carry things that day. They were indeed still alive. She deftly jumped down, holding a fruit knife, and slowly approached us. The moment she pushed the door open, I pulled her in and held the knife to her neck. Don't move. Although she had helped us before, she was now holding a knife, and I couldn't afford to take any chances. The girl we subdued immediately dropped the knife and raised her hands. Don't kill me. I just came to find some food. I mean no harm. I had the knife for zombies. I kicked her knife away, feeling conflicted inside. She had discovered us and had seen our supplies. A single shot from her could make us a target. Eliminating her seemed the safest option, but although I had killed zombies, I had never killed a person, and I couldn't bring myself to do it, especially since she didn't seem to be lying. Gabriella and Sophia also hesitated, looking at me uncertainly. I remember you guys, the ones who bought a lot of milk powder last time. It's really great that you're still alive. I thought everyone was dead. The girl whispered softly. I finally let go of the knife in my hand. This girl was terrifyingly saint-like. Even when I was holding the knife to her, she had said, "It's really great that you are all alive." We gave her some food, and just as we were about to warn her not to come back or else we wouldn't be so polite, she spoke first. I won't take your food for nothing. I'll have my roommate send down some blueberries and lemons. Maybe you can use them. We thought she was lying. How could fruits last that long? But to our surprise, her roommate actually lowered down a plastic bag containing more than 20 blueberries and 2 small lemons. We grew these ourselves, and we'll have some tomatoes ripe in a few days. We'll give you some then, the girl said without reservation. Why would you grow these? We asked, puzzled. We started growing blueberries and lemons just for fun, and I don't know how, but the tomatoes just started growing from the pot. Maybe brought by birds. I had heard that birds could carry seeds, but regardless of how they came, they were certainly a big help at this time. My name is Autumn. I'm from the dorm 2 floors above you. What are your names? The girls seemed to have a knack for socializing, unlike me who would have quickly left after getting the food. We told her our names, and she even invited us to her dorm to see the fruits they were growing. Autumn, keep a low profile, or you won't even know how you might end up, I warned her. Autumn nodded silently. As she reached the door, she suddenly turned back. But you are good people, aren't you? Otherwise, you could have easily killed me just now. She climbed back nimbly, leaving the 4 of us exchanging looks. Must be a saint reincarnated, Gabriella muttered under her breath before breaking into a laugh. We all smiled too. The oppressive life of the past month finally relaxed a bit today. We sliced the lemons and mixed them with honey for Allison to drink, and she finally stopped vomiting so violently. 2 days later, Autumn actually sent down 6 tomatoes. Although they weren't very pretty, they tasted somewhat sweet and tangy. We tasted a few and gave the rest to Allison. We reciprocated by sending some food to Autumn and told her how to avoid attracting zombies during menstruation. And gradually we began to communicate more. But they never asked us why we had stockpiled so many supplies. I knew they were curious too, but perhaps they didn't ask out of fear, or maybe out of respect. On the 50th day after the apocalypse began, we spotted living people, tall young men, carrying buckets, were smeared with a dark red paste, carefully walking among the zombies, who surprisingly did not attack them. How did they manage that? Allison asked in amazement. I couldn't see clearly what was on them. So I used my phone's camera to zoom in for a closer look. Through the camera, it appeared that they were smeared with flesh and blood. My mind flashed back to a zombie TV show I had seen, where people covered themselves with zombie flesh and blood to mask their scent and successfully avoided the zombies. I shared this with Allison and the others, and they found it incredible. We continued to watch the young men as they quickly passed through the woods to an artificial lake, filled their buckets with water, and then ran off. Although they were successful, we dared not try catching zombies to experiment, for a single mistake could be fatal, yet others began to follow their example, trying to survive by capturing zombies. But the outcomes were as we expected. Ultimately, they all perished at the hands of zombies. Those 4 young men must have had not only courage, but also great strength, probably athletes. The others dared not act recklessly, but inaction meant no food. And gradually they began to argue, fight, and scuffle, until it all went quiet. On the 70th day of the apocalypse, the weather finally started to cool as autumn approached. Allison's abdomen began to bulge slightly, the small life within her growing strongly like a determined sprout. Our lives too began to carry hope. Amidst so much death that had passed, this tiny sprout represents a small hope. Allison suffered severely from morning sickness. The lemons that once helped had long been eaten, and nothing else could alleviate her nausea, causing her body to become increasingly frail. We took great care of her and often spoke to the little baby in her belly, hoping he would understand his mother's hardships. Miraculously, it seemed as if the little one understood, as Allison gradually began to feel an appetite, and her morning sickness wasn't as severe as before. I believe this little sprout will surely grow up to be a sensible child. We've planned that if the rescue team hasn't arrived by the time the child is born, we will make our way to the neighboring agricultural university. There, with its agricultural base and greenhouses, likely still stocked with seeds and fertilizers, we could settle down and start farming. Autumn and her roommate Brianna would occasionally sneak down under the cover of night, and were surprised to see Allison pregnant. So, you are buying baby formula because you have a little one on the way, Autumn said with a look of realization. May I touch him? Allison nodded. Go ahead, thanks to all the fruit you've shared. This child will grow up healthy partly because of you. Autumn carefully placed her hand on Allison's belly. The baby is moving. He's kicking me. How could that be? He's only 3 months old and not moving yet. It must be my stomach making you think that, Allison said with a smile. Now looking much healthier and truly maternal, I want to be his godmother when he's born, Autumn declared. Gabriella clicked her tongue. We all just want to be aunts, and here you are wanting to be a godmother, dreaming big. Everyone laughed softly. The sky was heavily clouded, hiding the moonlight. Though clouds can obscure the moon, they cannot steal it away. On the 80th day of the apocalypse, those 4 boys appeared again. This time, they weren't here to fetch water, but to look for food. Armed with clubs and knives, they searched the buildings around us for supplies. In a past life, we had seen how savagely survivors could fight over a single cookie. In the face of hunger, human decency was worthless. Fortunately, after finding some supplies, they left without approaching our building. However, as they were leaving, I overheard them saying our building had many zombies. More zombies mean there are living people. I didn't know if they were on to us, but it was a reminder that we needed to be cautious. We started to exercise, rehearsing how we would defend ourselves if someone came to rob us. I recalled the fighting techniques my dad had taught me and passed them on to Gabriella and Sophia. However, I also felt sad, not knowing how my parents were doing now. On the 112th day of the apocalypse, several military planes flew over our school. It was the Army's planes, a sign that our country still stood, though the planes merely passed by. They gave us hope. The nation endures, and so do its people and soldiers. Our home must still be there. On the 175th day of the apocalypse, it was New Year's Day. This day held significant meaning for us. In a past life, we had died to zombies just an hour before the new year, but now, we were still alive. We kept our eyes open until the new year arrived. We've survived. The four of us hugged tightly, unable to hold back tears. Suddenly, Allison cried out softly, gently touching her belly. "What's wrong?" Gabriella and Sophia asked anxiously. Allison gasped, "The little rascal is kicking me. He's a little mischief maker." Gabriella laughed. "Little baby, don't bully mommy," Sophia said to Allison's belly. I also reached out and could feel a small bump. Allison said it was the baby's hand. It was my first time touching a fetus, and the feeling was extraordinary, although I wasn't related by blood. A sense of responsibility inexplicably arose in my heart. We were initially panicked by his arrival, afraid that he would be a burden, but now, I look forward to his safe and healthy birth, hoping he grows up in a world free of zombies, surrounded only by love and blessings. That night, we all had good dreams. On the 200th day of the apocalypse, it was the Lunar New Year. Snow began to fall, blanketing the world in white. The number of zombies at the school had decreased significantly, their whereabouts unknown. Looking down the hallway, the zombies were gone, leaving behind only Beatrice's cell phone. I can still hear her last conversation with her mother ringing in my ears, and I find myself missing my own parents. In the snowy landscape, two red-crowned cranes danced gracefully, a sight of elegance we had never seen before. We all crowded at the window, mesmerized. As about 7 or 8 zombies approached them, we tensed up, sensing danger. The cranes took flight, while we remained trapped, unsure of when we would be free. Suddenly, a rebar flew, piercing a zombie's skull, causing it to fall as dark blood stained the white snow. The 4 boys appeared again, carrying knives. They approached, decapitating a zombie and discarding its head, then smearing its blood on themselves. The nearby zombies, drawn by the scent of living humans, swarmed over. The boys fiercely chopped off zombie heads, dragging the bodies toward our dormitory building. "They seem to be heading to our dorm," Gabriella said nervously. Soon, we heard the sound of the main door being shut, followed by the noise of searching and rummaging. No one had visited our building before, so there should still be some supplies left. They might stay for a while. What should we do? They'll definitely come up, and they're so strong. We're just like chicks in front of them. I had gotten a good look at the 4 of them, nearly 6 feet tall. They could decapitate a zombie with a single strike. We definitely couldn't match them in a fight. I checked our supplies. Since we usually shared with Autumn and the others, we only had 17 buckets of water left, and food that could last maybe 3 to 4 months. Let's hide in the activity room for now. If they find us, we'll share our supplies if that's what they want, but if it comes to life and death, we won't back down, I said. Gabriella, Sophia, and Allison agreed, as those were our only options at the moment. The 4 boys didn't come up immediately. They kept searching the lower floors, even lighting books for warmth. We could hear their complaints and curses. They searched floor by floor, and on the 3rd day, they reached our 4th floor. We hid in the activity room, covering a hole in the wall with a large poster. With a loud bang, our bedroom door was kicked forcefully, but didn't open. "This door is pretty sturdy, damn it, can't kick it open with 1 foot, one of them said. "I think you just haven't eaten enough, move aside." "Let me do it," another sneered, then kicked hard. With a crack, the door panel shattered, but because we had propped it with wood slantingly, the door, though broken, remained closed. They paused, and then it went quiet. We didn't know what they were doing, and could only tightly grip our weapons. About 3 minutes later, they suddenly appeared on our balcony, having climbed down from the 5th floor. "There are so many wooden boards here. Someone must be living here," their voices carried over. "Where are they, though?" someone asked, sitting near a hole in the wall, making our hearts leap to our throats. "They probably went out for food and got bitten by zombies." Someone knocked on the wooden boards. "Which department's female dormitory is this? They can even do carpentry. That's pretty badass. It must be the civil engineering or architecture department. Female dorms always smell nice, everything outside stinks, but their blankets still smell good. They started tampering with our stuff. I'm 20 and still don't know what a woman feels like. I hope I don't die a virgin. What a waste of my looks and physique," someone lamented. "Can't you speak more auspiciously during the new year?" A mischievous voice chided, I wish I could be luckier, I really want a girlfriend. Bo, have you ever been in a relationship? Of course I have. The mischievous voice suddenly stopped. Just as we were puzzled, a poster was torn open, and a young man with a knife crawled through the hole. We were discovered. Without a word, he lunged at us with his knife. I grabbed his arm. My father had taught me about pressure points on the human arm that could temporarily paralyze it. I had used this tactic in a previous life to escape after injuring someone. This time, I struck the same spot on his arm. I succeeded. The knife fell from the young man's hand, but my body was thrown into the air and then slammed hard onto the ground. He had flung me with his other hand. At that moment, I realized that in the face of absolute strength, skill meant nothing. The disparity in our strength was too great. A severe ringing filled my brain, and amidst my dizziness, I saw Gabriella and Sophia rushing over to save me, while Autumn and Brianna swung their sticks. The other 3 boys also crawled through, and we scuffled together. I didn't know how many punches I took, but I didn't let them off easily either. I bit fiercely into one of their hands, drawing blood. No, Allison screamed, kneeling in front of the boy and spreading her arms to protect me, tears streaming down her face. Take everything. Just don't kill her. It was then that I noticed the boy had already moved his knife towards my throat. The boy and his companions stopped, looking at us in surprise. Are you human? The boy asked. Of course, we're human. I released my bite, my mouth filled with the taste of blood. He had suffered a significant bite from me. He also withdrew his knife. If you're human, why didn't you speak? You bit like zombies. That's when we realized. They thought we were zombies, so they attacked with knives. And we fought back thinking they were here to rob and kill us. Everyone was on edge, ready to snap at any moment. We sat far apart from each other. They gathered and talked among themselves. Through their conversation, I learned that the talkative boy I had bitten was Bo, the one afraid of dying a virgin was Bennett, and the other 2 who sneakily watched us were Bryce and Calvin. Bo was their squad leader, and the other 3 listened to him closely as he bandaged his wound. He had our supplies, then his gaze fell on Allison's belly. There's even a pregnant woman. Allison was now 8 months pregnant and looked pale after the ordeal. We can share our supplies with you, but don't try any tricks, I told them sternly. Bo looked at us disdainfully. What if we do want to play tricks? What can you do about it? You're right, we can't do much about you, but they can. I pointed outside at the zombies. If we recklessly cut our veins and our blood spurts out, do you think those zombies outside won't crazily rush towards us? Can you guarantee that you'll escape unscathed? Bo's expression gradually became serious. He could tell we weren't joking. We helped Allison to lie down and covered her with several blankets, but her hands remained ice cold. I moved all the books out to start a fire for warmth. Since we had already been discovered, there was no longer a need for caution. Bennett and the other 2 were peering over curiously, while Bo fiddled with the knife in his hand. That night, neither of us got much sleep. The next day, we ate some dry instant noodles, but Bo and his group cooked a meal. They tore up books and split tables for firewood, and cooked some of our vacuum-packed food with rice, filling the air with a delicious aroma. They ate ravenously, almost licking the pot clean in the end. Later, they brought up 2 buckets of snow to melt and wash off the stains on their bodies. The water in the basin quickly turned a dark red from the zombie blood they had wiped off themselves. Aren't you afraid the virus will enter through your wounds? I had bitten him yesterday, and he still had injuries on his hand. Bo appeared unconcerned. I'm tough. In the face of the virus, all creatures are equal. I think he's not afraid of getting infected because the virus in the blood of the dead zombies dies as well. And he probably knows this from previous experiences, which is why he isn't worried. Every living person here hasn't just simply survived. Once cleaned up, they didn't look so frightening. Their youthful faces still retained a bit of boyishness, and when they sat quietly, one could almost be fooled into thinking they were well-behaved. Bo and his group moved into the dormitory next to ours, keeping to themselves except for when going to the common room to eat. Every day they patrolled the area, dealing swiftly and cleanly with any zombies that came close. I don't know why they didn't just take supplies and leave, or even stay on a different floor, but for some reason, they chose to stay with us. Recalling Bennett's previous mention of wanting a girlfriend, could it be? But we couldn't dwell on that now, because after the incident, Allison was shocked and her mental state began to deteriorate, struggling to eat anything. We were worried, but felt powerless, only able to carefully look after her while preparing for the possibility of premature labor. Bennett came by occasionally, looking like he wanted to say something. If you have something to say, just say it. I didn't like playing guessing games. Bennett half-stepped through a hole in the wall. Although I'm not a doctor, I think she needs one. That's stating the obvious. We were also in desperate need of a doctor, but there was nowhere to find one now. Bo dragged Bennett away. Don't make things worse, our fuel had run out, so we could only burn tables and chairs. When Allison woke up, we immediately fed her some porridge, but she shook her head after 2 sips. I want an ice-cold Coke, a Pepsi. She wasn't being unreasonable. Her delirium at this moment meant she wasn't thinking clearly. We were terrified, scared something would happen to her. Fortunately, she regained clarity after a while and looked at us, puzzled. Why are you crying? Gabriella and the others turned away, and I replied, "It's too cold, we're freezing." She gently pushed us, "Then go to bed and cover up with blankets." "I'm fine, don't worry." I nodded, "Okay, we'll go to bed in a bit." Soon Allison fell asleep again, and we didn't dare leave her side, periodically checking her breathing for fear she would leave us. She was too fragile now. Gabriella and Sophia searched the dormitory building again, but found nothing. After a while, Bo handed me a cup filled with water. "What's this?" I sniffed it. It had a sweet scent. Bo replied, "Sugar water. She might be anemic or have low blood sugar." "How do you know that?" "Pepsi is very sweet, and her wanting to drink it suggests that her body is signaling a need for sugar. We've seen this during our training sessions before, but that's just my guess. Try it." I woke Allison up and fed her some sugary water. After drinking a few sips, she seemed to perk up a bit and even had an appetite to eat something before going back to sleep. "Thank you," I said to him. He pursed his lips. "We should be the ones apologizing. If we hadn't been so impulsive and attacked you back then, maybe she wouldn't be in this state." Bo apologized. I had always been wary and displeased with them, but hearing him say that, I couldn't help but sigh. It's hard to say who's right or wrong in this matter. We all just want to survive. Day 210 of the apocalypse. Thick clouds pressed down again, and snow began to drift from the sky. While cooking, Autumn suddenly called out from the 6th-floor balcony, "Listen, do you hear that? Sounds like a car, doesn't it?" We listened carefully and indeed heard a faint sound, seemingly coming from the direction of the neighboring agricultural university. Bo and the others climbed up to the rooftop to look. And after a while, they came back and reported that there indeed were people there, and it seemed like a rescue team. We were overjoyed and immediately gathered books and wood to start a smoke signal in hopes of drawing their attention, but no matter what, the smoke wouldn't thicken, and our shouts went unheard. Bo and the others then ran out and set fire to a dormitory building, hoping that would make us noticeable. However, the heavy snow dampened the fire, and it also attracted zombies. So we had to give up the plan. "Bo, Bennett, let's go check it out first thing tomorrow morning. Bryce and Calvin, you guys stay here to help." Bo began to arrange, thinking it was time to take action. "Okay," Bennett agreed without hesitation. Since they were willing to brave the dangers to find a way out, we naturally did not hesitate to lend our support. We gave them motorcycle helmets and gloves we had bought earlier, hoping they would offer some protection. However, a sudden change occurred in the middle of the night. Allison experienced abdominal pain and bleeding. It was a premature birth. Sophia went to boil water. Autumn and Brianna secured the doors and windows with tape. Bo and Bennett sprayed around mosquito repellent and disinfectant, while Gabriella and I took on the task of delivering the baby. We had never done anything like this. We were still children ourselves, but we had no choice but to proceed. Allison was in so much pain that her face turned pale, but she bit down on a towel without making a sound, fearing that any noise might attract zombies. I whispered the rhythm I had learned from a video, and there was more blood on the sheets than we had anticipated. Worried about nearby zombies, Bo and the others went downstairs with knives to stand guard. I thought they might run away, especially if Allison bled heavily, which would surely attract zombies. At dawn, the baby was finally born, a wrinkled little girl. Due to her mother's malnutrition, the baby was very light, feeling only about 3 or 4 pounds in my arms. The little girl was indeed sensible. She started crying as soon as she was born, sparing us from having to elicit her cries, but after a couple of cries, she fell silent, perhaps due to the cold weather. I quickly took the baby to the activity room and cleaned her with warm water. I thought I would be clumsy, but I managed quite efficiently. Perhaps this is what human potential is all about. After dressing the little girl and wrapping her in a blanket, Bo and the others gathered around to look. "Why does she look so ugly, like a little old lady?" Calvin wondered aloud, immediately attracting warning glances from us. Calvin quickly corrected himself. "No, not ugly, quite pretty." The baby moved a bit then lay still having a heartbeat, but, after all, being born prematurely. Sophia then ran over in a panic. "Alyssa," no matter how much we called, Allison wouldn't wake up. I rushed over immediately and found Allison truly unconscious. I suspected it was due to severe bleeding from childbirth, but after lifting the blankets, although there was some bleeding, it wasn't excessive. It must have been something else that caused her to faint. I made a decision. Let's head to the agricultural university now. If we waited for Bo and the others to fetch help, There was no telling if Allison and the baby could hold on that long. Moreover, for some unknown reason, zombies were continuously gathering towards our location. The amount of blood Gabriella lost was minimal and, masked by the scent of floral water and disinfectant, shouldn't have attracted zombies from afar. If the zombies surrounded us before their return, we wouldn't be able to defend ourselves. It would be better to make a run for it while the zombies hadn't fully assembled yet. But how can Allison go out in this condition? Sophia worriedly asked. I'll carry Allison on my back, and Calvin, you hold the baby. Bennett and Bryce, you guys lead the way, Bo said as he took off his down jacket and slung Allison on his back with a sheet, trying to minimize her discomfort after childbirth. Gabriella, Sophia, let's hang the bloody sheets out the window to divert the zombies. Quick, Autumn, Brianna, come help too, I instructed as I tore the blood-soaked sheets into pieces, weighed them down, and hung them outside. The trick worked. The zombies were lured to the other side of the dormitory. Rub this on. Bo handed us bottles filled with zombie blood. We quickly smeared ourselves with it and left the dormitory, racing through the heavy snow towards the agricultural university. The cold wind was like knives against our skin, and running so intensely made our lungs feel like they were about to burst. Our throats tasted of blood, but hope was ahead, and we had to keep running. Finally, we saw some lights ahead, a sign of people, but the zombies were converging from all directions, and zombie blood could no longer disguise us. Bennett, go call for help, Bo shouted. Okay, Bennett ran, stripping off his clothes until his torso was bare, disappearing into the night like an arrow. As we neared our school's entrance, several zombies blocked our path, which we cleared with the weapons in our hands. Killing one wave only brought another, and we continued fighting fiercely, our blood staining the white snow beneath us. I didn't know how Allison was doing. All I saw was Bo fighting desperately while carrying her. Calvin, with the baby wrapped in his arms, protected the child with one hand and cleaved through zombie brains with the other. Bryce also bravely cleared the way, decapitating one zombie after another. They could have just run. They were athletes with the ability to reach the rescue team. Although we were all students from the same university, if it weren't for this apocalyptic world, the architecture students like us might never have met the sports students. We were strangers brought together by chance, yet now we depended on each other for survival. And then Autumn, Brianna, they trusted us unreservedly. Never uttering a word of complaint, a zombie reached for Allison, but another zombie knocked it away, as if saving her. But how could that be, since when do zombies save people? Quick, into the guard room. There are no zombies inside, Gabriella yelled. We hurried over and secured the doors and windows once inside. Bryce held the door like a one-man fortress, while Gabriella and the others guarded the windows. At that moment, Allison's eyes fluttered open, showing some signs of consciousness. Allison, how are you feeling? I asked anxiously. Allison looked at me weakly. I'm okay. How's the baby? The baby's still alive, nice and warm, Calvin replied, touching the little infant in his arms. Thank you, Allison said to Calvin, then added, Alyssa, I saw Alexander, he came to get me. Suddenly, she became alert. Could this be a fleeting resurgence? My heart ached as I said, don't talk nonsense, you're going to be fine. The rescue team will be here soon. She tried to say something, moving her lips weakly, but she didn't have the strength left. All she could do was stretch out her hand towards us, and we all held it tightly. That summer when we were 18, we came from all over to room 412 in the architecture department at Jung University. We trained together, attended classes, and played together. Even though we sometimes had disagreements, we always made up quickly. We had promised to be lifelong best friends, to strive together in our youth, dance together in the square when we were old, and then, on the day we left this world, to look back on our lives with smiles and satisfaction. Allison, you absolutely cannot die here. Pull yourself together, I said firmly to her. Allison didn't respond. She just looked at us hazily, her eyes brimming with tears. Suddenly, gunfire erupted, and a heavy vehicle crashed through, scattering the zombies. The doors swung open, and soldiers appeared. We were pulled one by one into the vehicle, which then drove off furiously, plowing through zombies towards the agricultural university. We were rescued. Upon arriving at the university, medical staff immediately carried Allison on a stretcher into the emergency room, while the rest of us, 9 adults and 1 baby, were isolated separately. It's a miracle none of you were infected, the person checking us exclaimed. None of us responded, focused as we were on Allison's uncertain fate. Suddenly, the baby started crying. Calvin clumsily unstrapped the child he had been carrying on his chest. A nurse took the baby, but upon seeing something, she screamed in horror and, as if she had touched a snake, threw the baby away. I quickly caught the baby, and then I was stunned too. There was a dark purple wound on the tiny baby's face. She had been injured by a zombie. I was in shock, overwhelmed by a feeling of helplessness that made it hard to breathe. She was so small, she had just come into this world. How could this happen? I was holding her the whole time. I wasn't injured. How could she be? Calvin was full of self-blame. A security officer approached and aimed a gun at the little girl. They couldn't allow any infected individuals at the camp. I blocked the gun with my hand, tears uncontrollably streaming down my face. She's still human. Can we wait until her human life ends and she turns into a zombie? Then let her pass to another world. Gabriella and others also stepped forward to block the gun, and the security personnel sighed and lowered the weapon. As time ticked by, the little child, unaware of what was about to happen, continued to cry. She was hungry. She hadn't eaten anything since she was born. Even after 5 minutes, she was still crying. We all watched in shock because no one who had been infected stayed human for more than 5 minutes. But this baby did. She remained human. There were no terrifying marks on her. Her little face was flushed red from crying. Her heart was still beating, thumping loudly. I could feel it. She hasn't turned into a zombie. She's still alive, I said, my voice trembling with emotion. The security officer rushed outside, his voice also shaking. Get all the virologists to isolation room 3, immediately, as a large group of people in protective suits entered. We were taken to another room where someone brought us hot water. So, is Little Star here to save the world? Sophia murmured. Little Star was the nickname we had given the child. We didn't know the baby's gender, and the name was suitable for both a boy and a girl. It must be, that's why we… Gabriella stopped mid-sentence, but I knew what she wanted to say. She meant to say that thus, we are reborn. If little stars truly have the power to save the world, then the meaning of our rebirth isn't just for us to survive alone, but to protect the arrival of this little angel. When the snow stopped, Allison woke up. The doctor said she had fainted due to prolonged anemia, exhaustion from childbirth, and potassium loss. Luckily, she was brought in just in time and was pulled back from the brink of death. When we visited her in the hospital room, she was receiving in-4 drip. Although still weak, she was able to speak. Where is the baby? She asked. As we were thinking about how to explain, Sophia said with a smile, she's out saving the world. This answer was unexpected yet made perfect sense. Yes, that tiny life was indeed shouldering the mission to save the world at that moment. On the 3rd night, the virologists shared news that antigens capable of suppressing the virus were found in Little Star's blood. This explained why Little Star didn't turn into a zombie after being scratched. As for why Little Star had these antigens, the experts couldn't yet explain. The initial theory was similar to how newborn umbilical cord blood can rebuild the human body's hematopoietic and immune systems, or perhaps it was a form of self-protection by the fetus sensing the harsh external environment while in the womb. The specific answer would require further research. Little Star was conceived when her parents loved each other before the apocalypse, gestated through the hardships of the end times, and born on the run amidst strife and struggle. Whether it is theology or science, she was destined to be extraordinary. I stepped outside and looked up at the sky. The once oppressive clouds had dispersed, revealing a bright, tranquil moon, quietly illuminating the world. Why are you crying if things turned out so well? Bo appeared beside me. I reached up to touch my face, only then realizing it was wet with tears. It's nothing, maybe just too happy. Thanks for everything this time. How is Bennett now? Bennett had exhausted himself fetching help that day and had collapsed from sheer fatigue. He's fine, just needs a couple of days to rest. I nodded, then after a moment of silence, voiced the question that had been on my mind. Why didn't you guys leave after you got the supplies that day? Was it because… He looked at me disdainfully. Stop there. Did you even see yourselves, hair disheveled, faces pale as ghosts? We thought you were zombies. How could we have any improper thoughts towards you? I retorted without backing down. You guys weren't any better, covered in dirt and reeking, looking more like ghosts than we did. He actually burst out laughing and after a while said softly, the reason we didn't leave was because we were afraid that once we left, we might never see living people again. Only then did I understand that these 4 seemingly carefree individuals also craved human warmth. On the 220th day of the apocalypse, the tireless virologists announced the completion of the artificially synthesized antigen, which began clinical trials. We finally got to see Little Star. She had been in the lab for a while, making it hard to visit her. The nurse brought the little girl out, and Allison immediately reached out to take her. It was the first time she had seen her child since birth. She looked at her child tenderly, her gaze making even the cold winter feel warm at that moment. We gathered around too. Little Star was well cared for, looking much bigger and healthier than at birth, and the scar where the zombie had scratched her face had faded significantly. Calvin stood far away, not daring to come closer, burdened by guilt for not protecting Little Star better. Allison handed Little Star to him, understandingly saying, "Hold her." See if she's changed a lot since you last saw her." Calvin awkwardly took the child, examining her carefully. "She looks so much better now. She wasn't ugly before." We all couldn't help but laugh, and the gloom of the past few days lifted in that moment. When spring came and flowers bloomed, we took little Star for a walk in the campus. Many young people were farming around us. They were agricultural students who had survived the apocalypse by relying on the crops they grew. The government selected this place as a safe zone not only because it could accommodate a large number of rescue workers, it was also because there were certain production conditions here. We all signed up to join in, contributing our efforts to the restoration of production and daily life. Outside the school fence, numerous zombies wandered about. The current antigens could only protect the living from infection. Eradicating the virus would still be a long road ahead. Let's go somewhere else. "There are quite a few zombies here," I said to Allison, but Allison, looking strangely determined, walked towards the fence. We were frightened and immediately ran to stop her, only to hear her call out to a zombie, "Alexander." We looked at the zombie in disbelief. It was a young man, his body disfigured beyond recognition, barely resembling his original appearance. Upon closer inspection, it indeed was Alexander. On the snowy night we fled to the agricultural university. A zombie that nearly harmed Allison was knocked aside by another. I thought it was a coincidence. Back then, Allison claimed she saw Alexander, but we thought it was her hallucination. Now, it seemed neither a coincidence nor a hallucination. It was that bright and cheerful boy who had journeyed across mountains and rivers, keeping his promise to return, but fate played a cruel trick. He was forced to stop forever. Just a short distance from his beloved, Allison wept uncontrollably. Little Star, sensing her mother's sorrow and her father's eternal separation, also cried loudly. Alexander, pushed away by other zombies attracted by the noise, staggered away. The security personnel who arrived captured Alexander and took him back to the lab. After their research, they told us it was all a coincidence. Alexander had no life, no consciousness, no miracle. Allison took Alexander's ashes back home. The tablet didn't bear Alexander's name, but the words, "I love this world, but I love you more." These were the words Alexander had once used to confess his love to Allison, the once vibrant young man, now contained in a small box. We prayed he might have another life in that world. We hoped he successfully reached his beloved, living happily ever after with his family. After the sorrow, we resumed our lives. What was gone was gone. The future still awaited. 24 seasons changed from spring to autumn and back. Years passed, and 3 years went by in a blink. The 4 of us girls had become architects, leading the city's reconstruction under our seniors' guidance. Autumn excelled in farming, transitioning from a student in the landscape department to a leader in agricultural studies. Bo and Bennett joined the army in their first year, building new safe zones with the main force, protecting batch after batch of survivors. Little Star grew up healthy, becoming the darling of our safe zone. Sometimes mischievous, she often had Allison chasing her all over the yard, who said she was sensible. "She's really a little troublemaker," Allison said, exhausted and sweating, but then she laughed and added, "Just like her dad." In the 5th year, the zombie crisis was finally resolved, and I made a trip back to my hometown. When I pushed open the door of my house, it was covered in dust. My parents were gone. On the dining table, a cup held down an envelope labeled "For Alyssa." I opened the yellowed letter inside. Written in my dad's handwriting. Think about it. If you're reading this letter, it means we haven't met. Perhaps by now we are separated by life and death. But Mom and Dad want to tell you, we went out looking for you. We never gave up on you. Mom and Dad love you. The date was July 6th, the 3rd day after the apocalypse began. Although they didn't know if I would ever read this letter, they hoped I was alive. Clutching the letter, I knelt on the ground crying, my heart torn with pain. Reborn in this world, I never got to reunite with them. When I left, I also left behind a letter with my address and took a family portrait with me. Maybe one day in the future, we'll run into each other at some street corner, their hands clasped together, their temples turned gray, while I've grown into someone they no longer need to worry about. When I returned to the safe zone, Gabriella and Sophia were both talking about their boyfriends. Bo and the others had returned as well. After 5 years, they had shed their youthful air and now stood resolute and self-reliant, each capable of standing on their own. Now that everything had stabilized, there was no longer a need for them to be constantly on the move. This time, they were back for good. As soon as Calvin returned, he helped Allison take care of little Star, who clung to him like a little tail, following him everywhere. Even when someone joked that Uncle Calvin once called her an ugly doll, she just laughed it off without getting upset. One day, Allison told us that Calvin had proposed to her. "Did you say yes?" we asked her. She nodded. "I did. Star really likes him. She even calls him Dad sometimes. Plus, He has taken such good care of us over these 5 years, giving so much. Do you love him? We asked. She didn't answer directly, but instead looked out at a withered tree outside the window. We are both adults now. Half of those who survived this catastrophe have moved past their nightmares, while the other half are forever buried in the past. In early May, Allison and Calvin had a simple wedding ceremony, with little Star as their flower girl. We saw that Calvin's gaze never left Allison and little Star. We knew that he was truly in love in this marriage. Perhaps in this love, even the withered tree might feel the spring again. We drank a lot at the wedding, not returning until 10 o'clock at night. Gabriella and Sophia were taken home by their boyfriends, and seeing their sweet figures, my heart felt warm. On the way back to the dormitory, someone caught up with me from behind. It was Beau. While Bennett and Bryce teased and then quickly ran off. You've had too much to drink, I'll take you home. Beau grabbed my staggering self. I'm fine. A single bottle of wine won't stop me from getting home. I shrugged off his hand, insisting I was sober. He laughed and kept up beside me. Over these 5 years, we had kept in touch, having meals together whenever he was back at the base, and we had become good friends. What are you laughing at? I asked him. He stepped in front of me, blocking my path. Alyssa, I want to ask you a serious question. I nodded, puzzled by his solemnity, as I always took our conversation seriously. When I almost hurt you 5 years ago, did you ever hate me or dislike me? He asked earnestly. Yes, I admitted. Not just him, I had disliked all 4 of them, but the day you carried Allison on your back, I stopped disliking you completely. He nodded, a smile in his eyes. Since you don't dislike me anymore, how about we stop being just friends and become a couple? I was stunned in place. The May breeze brushed against my cheeks, feeling intensely warm. It's okay if you don't agree today. I'll ask you again tomorrow. His playful tone returned, just like when we first met 5 years ago. The streetlight slanted down from above his head, casting a warm glow on his face. I stared at the light, the memories of the past 5 years flashing through this warm glow, and then I heard myself say, no need for tomorrow, I can say yes right now. He gently embraced me, our shadows merging under the moonlight. We who were once unlikely ever to meet, right now, we are embracing each other. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that the present moment is the most important. I hope that all the beauty and expectations we have will arrive as promised, and that everything in this world will happen at just the right time.